F5. F5. Into F5. Top.
Good afternoon, everybody. Um, we are going to the fifth module, that is role of information, education. The main objectives of this unit is going to be that the role of education in disaster management is elaborately described, and we will also discuss the importance of information in disaster mitigation and also the different agencies for action in mechanisms of disaster mitigation, and we'll definitely discuss different types of agencies in tackling disasters, and also we will highlight the strategies for disaster preparedness at the community level. Now, disaster management arrangements are characterized by and implemented through strong partnerships between NGOs, commerce, industry sectors, government-owned corporations, and other local community. For the purpose of disaster preparedness, there is a national disaster framework covering institutional mechanism, prevention strategy, early warning system, disaster mitigation, preparedness and response, human resource development has been prepared. So the IEC, that is Information, Education and Communication, are of vital significance for disaster preparedness. Exactly, you can get prepared for the disaster that will happen in the future, which will also help in being ready for the mitigation process. So the goal of any disaster management initiative is to definitely build a disaster resistant community, be equipped with safer living and sustainable livelihoods that to serve its own development purposes. And the community is also the first respondent in any disaster situation. So it is very necessary to take initiatives in managing disasters. Now, how do we encourage the inner certain things that can be chalked out to initiate the initiate managing disasters? The first one could be mainly creating awareness. So, creating awareness, how can we create awarenesses? Through disaster training and information dissemination. That is, imparting information about the disaster, what are the disasters that can occur, and how do we cope up with it, and how do we come out of it. These are the kinds of information that can be imparted and are empowering the community to cope, can help the community to cope up with the disasters that may happen in the future. Next one can be community based approach. So community based approach is having it is adapted by most NGOs and some of the community based organizations. Within the vulnerable community, there are groups which are more vulnerable. That is, example, women and children, the aged and the physically challenged who need special care and attention, especially during disaster situations. So there are some efforts that are required to find such vulnerable groups and providing them special care and special assistance in terms of during the disaster when we have to evacuate or give relief aid and in disaster situations. So, as I told you about IEC, that is Information, Education, and Communication strategies. These strategies have to address the community needs and enable them to understand the benefits of the not definitely the short term, the long term disaster mitigation. So, education definitely has a key role to play in planning and implement strategies. So, disaster education has to take into cognizance of the contemporary knowledge and skills about disaster reduction, preparedness, and mitigation. So, the main goal of information, education, and communication is to reach the community. It can be any remote level and make them very much alert and aware about disaster. So, it attempts to enable the community organize itself to tackle a crisis, minimize the losses, and control the panic to facilitate smooth rescue and relief operation. So there is no ways that we can. The only thing that can be done is we need to be prepared. We can tackle the crisis, minimize the loss, and very much control the situation, and hence have a very smooth rescue and relief operations. So coming to IEC, the first one, can we impart information to the community? That is, we need to prepare the community for disaster management through information. That is giving the some of the basic knowledge by means of some data and practices and processes to the community. This will help in increasing the awareness. So out here, the key issue here is whether the necessary information is available to the to impart it to the people. So if there are necessary informations, then based on which they may form more realistic perspectives and be better prepared to anticipate and face the disaster. So very important out here is information because of which we can give them awareness and they can be very much sure about how to anticipate and face the disaster. So information in this context is to tell the community about the hazards. Now hazards of many disasters, it could be flood, cyclones, and of disasters. Now information must be definitely based on facts and not on some the things that cannot be based on facts will not be considered. So it must be based on facts ascertained by competent authorities. So information in this manner creates a picture of the reality and helps them to realize the risk. Coming to education, so how can we educate the community? So educating implies learning that makes people aware and knowledgeable. So the information that we give is going to be these kind of activities, that is creativity addresses the value of the people in question, and besides making them aware of the risks, it enlightens them about their issues, the actions needed to be taken, and their roles. It is very important that the actions that are needed to be taken and the play during a disaster. So, education enlightens people about why they have to be prepared for the disaster, and it tells them what to do and very importantly, what not to do for preventing or mitigating disasters. Now, people generally have fatalist disasters where there is a belief that disasters are considered as act of god and demonstrate helplessness, which is quite a wrong idea. So if we have enough of information and if we are educated enough, so it can lessen these kind of attitudes by making communities aware of. So the best alternatives will be available with us, and the means of mitigating them and enabling them to to take counter disaster measures. So disaster education can go a long way in developing knowledgeable and give enough of awareness. So it is very much necessary to emphasize on various types of disasters. What is a hazard assessment? What is a risk analysis? Contingency planning. That is, what is a planning that you can do during the crisis, and warning system. That is, there are many kind of techniques as of now in the current era where you can warn the community, mapping disaster zones, disaster coping mechanisms, and many more. So the educational institutions can definitely contribute towards generation of knowledge in the area of disasters, develop expertise in specific types of disaster, and also impart trade fields. So information and education, we have seen the role that will be played by both of them. Now coming to the communication, that is, it involves exchange, information exchange between two or more group individuals. It could be applied to both emergency communication. So, basically, in terms of disaster education and preparedness, communication is a process of knowledge transfer to the community regarding what are the risks that is involved in the disaster, how can we prepare and face the disaster, and what are the mitigating measures. Strikes, communication is very, very important and becomes an essential support for relief as well as search and rescue operation. So, field teams will have to be in contact with the base station or central cell. And the disaster communication management means definitely the designing of appropriate communication procedures and contents in advance. We cannot prepare all these things once a disaster occurs. So all these things have to be done in advance according to the nature and objectives of the disaster. Every disaster cannot be dealt in the same way. So based on the nature and objectives of the disaster, we have to plan the strategy and contents in advance to smoothen its operation, and because of which we can avoid a lot of misunderstanding and other complicated problems which may arise because of, definitely because of the communication gap. Now coming to the training, so how can training help in disaster preparation of disaster? So training attempts to improve the knowledge. Now having knowledge is not enough, we need enough of training to put this into practice, and the skills, attitudes, all these things among the recipients. So with regard to managing disasters, training accorded a very important place as it imparts the necessary knowledge and skills to different categories of personnel. Now, training can also improve the performance of people involved in managing the crisis, and as I told you, knowledge alone is skill. So there is a right way of applying this knowledge, which training is going to help to do so. So training needs to be given and given to be built, strengthen, and enhance the capacities of the individuals, organizations, and communities. So it is very necessary to have institutional training. One of the examples that can be given here is training on cyclone preparedness that aims to minimize the loss of lives and property in cyclonic disasters by strengthening the capacity in disaster management of coastal people. So, some of the roles and responsibilities of international agencies. So, disaster by definition is an occurrence of an event. Okay, so there are different agencies, there are different international agencies that play a role. So, with the world becoming a global village, nations have definitely increased. In such a scenario, what happens is the disaster assistance has got a respectable image and makes it acceptable part of international relations. So the international agencies, different agencies like UN organization, Red Cross, Red Crescent, foreign governments, and they can be rushed during the emergency assistance with the search and rescue operations, medical aid, relief supplies. So some of these kind of international agencies will definitely be helpful during the disaster. So during the sudden disasters, assistance is needed, and the affected recipient country is usually in some form of post impact shock. So, in such a situation, the recipient countries may have difficulty in identifying what kind of assistance is needed. In some circumstances, the affected community may become totally or over dependent on aid. And in such situations, what happens is the traditional practices of combating disasters get eroded, and self coping mechanism of rehabilitation have to be strengthened. So during severe and widely publicized disasters, oversupply of aid in itself becomes a problem. So the transport communication and which get severely damaged have to be tackled with volunteers and relief suppliers. So the United Nations system, the emergency management system of United Nations is quite complex. UN has designated the Office of Coordinator of Human Affairs for handling immediate disaster response and United Nations Development Program to promote the disaster prevention, mitigation, and preparedness. Excuse me. So the specialized UN agencies, there are several specialized UN agencies like INSA, International Search and Rescue Advisory Group, UN Disaster Assessment and Coordination Team, On-Site Operations Coordination Center. So there are several agencies, international agencies of this kind. So the role of these international agencies to the functioning of the above systems. So UN Disaster Mitigation Team in India has an inter-agency working group consisting of United Nations Development Program. So bank also, which comes 1 minute. This one. Leave it straight.
One.
Oh, okay, then that.
This also, eight sides also. This also. Only eight. Where's that? You only.
For the inconvenience. So the World Bank, that is IBRD, International Bank for Reconstruction Development and Development, popularly known as World Bank, offers different loans for reconstruction and development for developing countries. So in July 1998, specialist disaster setup as its headquarter being in Washington, D.C. The World Bank has also posted disaster management specialists at some of its offices. So, realizing the importance of this disaster management in development projects, World Bank has now incorporated disaster management components in many of its projects. So the Asian Development Bank, one of another international agency, is a Philippines-based regional development bank for Asia and the Pacific. It provides a long-term project financing, and ADB has also financed several rehabilitation projects in India, mostly in International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. So ADB also does research on disaster management and has brought out some very useful publications. So the international agencies play a key role in all the activities of disaster management cycle. So these are some of the mentioned as of now. Some of the role of non-governmental organizations. So The non-governmental organization, that's the NGO, occupies a place of prominence in establishing a link between the government and community. So they perform varied roles in pre-disaster, during disaster, post-disaster stages. So there are many non-governmental organizations, some of them being Abhiyan, which has helped in during the aftermath of the devastating cyclone that hit the Kutch in May 1998. 29 voluntary organizations which has undertaken coordination, planning, and lobbying, and capacity building activities. Another one could be Vasudev, that is voluntary agencies for sustainable universal development and emerging action. So that is a full form of it. The network was formed with the intention of creating a bridge between the NGOs and government sector. And Indian Red Cross Society, which functions at the national, state, and the district level. So this is an organization that provides relief. Since this is an offshoot of an international movement, it is a non-political organization. So it is the image of the Red Cross that makes it one of the most acceptable institutions in providing relief. So till 1995, the Red Cross was working primarily only as a relief organization. From 1996, its focus from relief to disaster preparedness and started developing community-based disaster preparedness plans. Next one is the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. Uh, it is a coordination body of National Red Cross and Red Crescent societies. Activities that is performed by them is they publish World Disasters Report every year on different themes. So these are the role of non-governmental organization, that is NGOs. Now some of the role of community-based organizations, disaster risk management programs, um, and the Orissa State Disaster Mitigation Authority. These are some of the community-based organizations. The programs has components like disseminating information, education, and skills on construction, motivating house owners to build earthquake resistant houses, forming collectives for construction management, settlement planning exercises, and problem solving of individual beneficiaries. So, these community based organizations play a vital role in working with the people and build their cooperation. So, some of the efforts are needed to be made to orient these organizations towards certain key aspects of disaster management, such as assessing the risk, disaster mapping, and preparation of community based disaster preparedness plans, and many more. So we have seen the role of government organization, international organization, non-governmental organization, and now coming to what is the role of community. Community is an institution in itself, emerging as the most powerful entity in the entire mechanism of disaster management. So during disasters, the community, if they are well aware of the preventive actions it is required to take, definitely they can reduce the damage that is caused by the disaster. So definitely it is the community, especially at the grassroots level, which faces the wrath of the disasters. So hence, mitigation, preparedness efforts, and emergency response system need to be strengthened at the community level, because these are the people who are directly going to get affected by the effect of the disaster. Awareness and training of these kind of communities is particularly useful in the areas that are prone to frequent, and the efforts of people in certain areas are laudable, where communities have formed their own organizations and they take initiatives in such kind of situation. So it is also known that the local communities have an active part to play during and after the disaster occurs. So a good state of preparedness before a disaster may reduce its impact and also helps in reducing the losses. So one such community-based organization is the Village Task Force, formed in the villages of Andhra Pradesh by the CASA, that is the Church Auxiliary. The Village Task Force has been trained in emergency evacuation and the relief within the village. Now, the people themselves elect the members of task force, and during the disaster, it serves as a nodal body at village level. So, in South Asia, the Bangladesh Red Cross has in establishing a community-based early warning system in cyclone-affected districts in collaboration with IFRC. The Disaster Management Institute in India is working with the community in flood and drought-prone areas in the states like Rajasthan and Gujarat. Based disaster preparedness program are being initiated in various countries. In India, with the active role being played by Panchayat Raj institutions, efforts are initiated to strengthen the capacities of these kind of functionaries to enable them to work with the communities. Component of community preparedness has gained considerable significance in handling these kind of disasters. If human intervention can be listed as a cause of increase in the scale of destruction, then it is through community preparedness that intensity can be reduced. That is, if the human necessary for these kind of disasters, it is definitely because of the community's interference, the intensity also can be reduced. Next, coming to the public-private people partnership. So, the role of public-private people partnership in and mitigation cannot be overemphasized. So, it involves a triangular partnership of government, NGO, and people with the involvement of the Gram Sabha, especially at the grassroots level. So, the public-private people partnership and accountability. So, it gives an opportunity for people to have a say in the activities. So, under these public-private partnership programs, 42,526 houses were to be reconstructed, out of which 41,528 houses have been completed by 3. Now, coming to the role of family and individuals. So, during the disasters, the people have to act instantly. There is no time to think and then act accordingly. So, if a disaster occurs without any warning or predictions, or at a large scale, the first activity for an individual is to save the lives of the dear and the near ones, protect the valuable documents and properties, and later should join others in rendering all the possible help to the unfortunate and the needy ones. So, an individual is the basics unit whose family comes next. If individuals and families are well prepared for disaster, then the nation will be very well prepared for the disasters. There's the individual's attitude towards these disaster preparedness, which can reduce the risk of life and property. Each family should have a family disaster supply kit ready all the time so that they are very well prepared during the disaster. There are some family disaster plans, like you can be familiar with the types of disasters, find out how to help the elderly and the expecting mothers, physically challenged children, inquire about the disaster plans, fix places to meet, keep the address and phone numbers, have a friend from a place other than your place as a family contact, have a friend from a place other than um, as I said, discuss what to do during evacuation. So these are some of the family disaster plans that can be discussed among the families who are living in the disaster prone areas. Coming to the family disaster supplies kit. So what are the kits that will be needed during the disaster? That is to store in the plastic containers, keep it at least 3 days of have 3 days of supply of water. Then coming to the food, at least 3 days of non-perishable food, and the first aid kit, tools and supplies, battery operated radio, clothing, special items for women and children and old persons, and important family documents, definitely in a waterproof container. So we have seen the role of international agencies, NGOs, community, family. So now coming to the very important one, how can so the role of media. which can be print, broadcast, or displayed, is an organ. Media is definitely something that can be displayed in an organized means of reaching a very, very large number of people very quickly, very effectively, and definitely very efficient. So, the suggestive information and analytical role of the media must form a key component of disaster education. Now, the media can play an important role in the directions in this direction. That is, media can play how to highlight the vulnerable conditions of the community that is acutely affected and can become an active medium for community awareness. The Press Council of India celebrates the annual Press Day on November 16th each year. The Press Day on November 16, 2000 was observed with the theme of role of media and disaster management. So in 2000, that is when the Press Council of India to this role of media in disaster management. So preparing people to cope with the disasters. The national seminars were organized, and this is about the role of media. Now we have role of print media, which is also important. Which continues to be the many parts of the Indian society even today. The print media have major role to play in the pre-disaster prevention, mitigation, preparedness activities through appropriate community awareness. So media has to be very much proactive in nature rather than reactive. Need the right type of information that uh, they have to disseminate the right time of information at the appropriate time. So, for instance, in India, the reach of radio and television to the masses in providing information is getting organized, but there is a need to into these channels and enable them to disseminate the information accordingly and take a response and necessary action. So, with this, we come to the end of the fifth module, and this we will be continuing with the sixth one. That is, what are the technologies that are required for disaster management? I'll be sharing this. Unmute. Is the screen clearly visible right now? Um, I had a message that screen is blur. Is it visible? Yeah, I hope it is visible. So, in the current era, we have certain technologies for disaster management which will help us in informing the upcoming disaster and which also serves as a tool for communication during the disaster. So this module will give us an insight about the usage of technologies in the disaster management, and how what is the meaning of technologies for disaster management, and what is the use of GIS and GPS. Describe the application and application and use of ICST for different disasters. So, coming to what exactly technology can do, technology has the potential to perform Hello. We had an issue with the internet out here. So, about the Disaster Management Act, I would like to elaborate a little bit more on the Disaster Management Act. So, profile of India makes it vulnerable to various kinds of natural disasters. So, most common of which are floods, tsunami, cyclone, earthquake, and according to UNICEF report, with 27 out of 29 states and union territories are exposed to recurrent natural hazards. So, India is on the list of the world's most disaster prone countries. So, the Disaster Management Act 2005 was enacted on 23rd December 2005 to handle such disasters. So, this act establishes the management authority, which will be the apex body to manage and frame policies related to disaster management. It is headed by the Prime Minister, and the Ministry of Home Affairs is a nodal ministry responsible for it. It has around 11 chapters and 79 sections. So, according to the Section 2 of Management Act, so there is a definition of disaster given in it. It is a catastrophe or a mishap or a calamity or a grave occurrence in any area arising from a natural or man-made cause or by which results in substantial loss of life of or human suffering or damage to and destruction of property or damage to degradation of environment, and is of such a nature or magnitude as to be beyond the coping capacity of community of the affected area. So this means disaster. The meaning of disaster in the Disaster Management Act includes both natural and man-made disasters, as well as the disasters caused due to accidents or negligence, like an industrial or biological disaster. So the disaster management under the section of two means a process of planning, organizing, and coordinating and implementing measures that is necessary for prevention, mitigation, capacity building, preparedness to deal with disaster, quick response to any threatening disaster, assessing and the magnitude, rescue and relief, and rehabilitation. Some of the major objectives of this Disaster Management Act is to provide effective disaster management system in case of natural or man-made disasters. So, for this objective, this act empowers central government and establish various authorities at each level to look for such management in case of disaster. So, it includes mitigation strategies, capacity building, relief measures, and many more. Some of the provisions under the Disaster Management Act 2005. So, which is various authorities and bodies for the effective management of disasters at all the three levels, that is a national, state, and district level. It also provides a plan for each level. So, when it comes to the national level, we have the National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA, that is Section 3 of the Act authorizes the establishment of National Disaster Management Authority. It will consist certain members. So the first one is the Prime Minister of India as a chairperson of the National Authority, and preceding nine of them are to be nominated by the chairperson. One of these nine members nominated the chairperson to be designated as a vice chairperson of the national authority. So, Section 6 of the Act provides the powers and functions of the national authority, which are like making the policies on disaster management, approving the national plan, approving the plans by other ministries and departments, laying down guidelines for state authority, ministries, and departments, coordinating enforcement and plan, to recommend funds for mitigation, to provide support to other countries that are affected by disasters, and to take other measures for prevention, mitigation, preparedness, and capacity building for dealing with such disasters. So, it also includes making guidelines for functioning of the National Institute of Disaster Management. There is also an advisory committee uh, that comes under the section 7. There is an advisory committee that comes under the section 7 of the Act, the National Institute Advisory Committee, to advise or make recommendations on various aspects of the disaster management. So, the members in the advisory committee consist of experts in disaster management and the persons having practical experience in disaster management at any is a national, state, or district. The National Executive Committee, under the Section 8, provides for the constitution of National Executive Committee by the central government to assist the national authority in discharging its function. So the national consists of members. The secretary to the government of India in the ministry or department of central government having control over the disaster management as ex officio chairperson. The secretary to the Government of India, Departments of Atomic Energy, Agriculture, Finance, Health, Power, Rural Development, Environment and Forest, Science and Technology, Space, Telecommunication, Urban Development, Water Resources, and the Chief of the Integrated Defense Staff of the Chiefs of the Staff Committee as ex officio member. Any other officer to the central or state government may be invited by the chairperson. Section 10 gives the powers and the functions of the National Executive Committee. So it can some of the powers and functions are to act as coordinating and monitoring body for disaster management, preparing the national plan to be approved by national authority, monitoring the implementation of national policy, making guidelines for plans, providing technical assistance to state governments and authorities for carrying out their functions, and for carrying out the functions, monitoring the implementation of the national plan, evaluating the preparedness of the government at all levels to organize a specialized training program for disaster management, and to acquire government to provide such men and material resources in case of emergency response, rescue and relief to national authority. To advise, assist and coordinate activities of the concerned authorities, NGOs and others engaged in disaster management. To promote general education and awareness about disaster management and to perform such other functions as the national authority may require it to perform. So, coming to the national plan, under Section 11 of the Act, National Executive Committee shall prepare the national plan, which should be reviewed and updated manually and which shall include measures for prevention of disasters, measures for integration of mitigation measures in the plans, and measures for preparedness and capacity building to fight disaster situations, and duties and responsibilities of ministries and departments of Government of India. The next category is the National Institute of Disaster Management, that is NIDM. One under the Section 42 of the Act, the central government shall constitute this institute and prescribe its members' terms. Prescribes its members terms of office and vacancies. The main functions of this institute are as for developing training more research and documentation, formulate and implement a comprehensive development plan, assist in the formulation of national policies, assist the state governments and state training institutes, promote awareness among college students or school teachers, and organize study courses, conferences, lectures, and seminars within and outside the country. So the National Disaster Response Force, that is the NDRF, comes under the section 44 of the Act. The National Disaster Response Force shall be constituted to provide a specialized response at the time in disaster situations with the help of trained professionals. So these trained professionals will include medical staff, engineers, technicians, dog squads, rescuers. So the National Disaster Response Force has played a major role in rescuing people in many situations, like the Kosi breach in Bihar in 2008, the Kashmir flash floods in 2014, and the Kerala floods in 2018. So this is about the national level. We have a state level operation, that is a State Disaster Management Authority, SDMA. Under the section 14 of the Act authorizes the establishment of State Disaster Management Authority. It consists of the following members: the Chief Minister of the state or the Lieutenant Governor of the Union Territories as an ex officio chairperson of the state authority. Other members not be nominated by the chairperson of the state authority. One of these nominated persons to be designated as chairperson of state authority. One of these, the chairperson of the state executive committee is the chief executive officer of the state authority. In the case of Union Territory Assembly, except for Delhi, the Chief Minister will be the chairperson of the state authority. In case of Delhi, the Lieutenant Governor shall be the chairperson and the Chief Minister will be the chairperson of the state authority. So, the section 18 of the Act specifies the power and functions of the state disaster management, laying down the state policy, approving the state plans by other departments, laying down guidelines for different departments, monitoring the implementation, recommending funds for mitigation measures, reviewing the developmental plans of different departments for the state, reviewing the measures taken by mitigation. There is an advisory committee that comes under the section 17 of the Act. The state authority may constitute an advisory committee to make recommendations on disaster management, which shall consist of experts in disaster management having practical experience. State Executive Committee, that is section coming under the section 20, constitutes the state executive committee meant to assist the state authority in discharging its functions. Additionally, the state executive committee may constitute one or more subcommittee communities to discharge its functions smoothly. The state executive committee may consist of the members, which are as follows: the chief secretary to the state government as an ex officio chairperson, the four secretaries to the state government of such departments which it thinks fit. Section 22 specifies the powers and functions of the state executive committees, like implementation of the national and the state plan, testing the vulnerability of different parts of the state, laying down guidelines for preparing plans, providing technical assistance for carrying out their functions, coordinating the implementation of plans and guides, evaluating the preparedness at both government and non governmental levels, arranging response in the event of any threatening disaster situation, assisting and coordinating activities of the concerned authorities, NGOs, and others engaged in disaster management, promoting general education, awareness, and community training about disaster management, advice regarding financial matters, and ensuring the communication systems. So, the last category under the state level is the state plan. It shall be prepared by the state executive committee, which shall include the vulnerability of different parts of state to different measures to be taken for prevention and mitigation, the manner in which these measures shall be integrated with plans, measures to be taken for capacity building and preparedness, roles and responsibilities of different departments of state government. So these are the activities that will be performed at a state level. Coming to the district level, The District Disaster Management Authority, that is the DDMA, under the Section 25 of the Act, authorizes the establishment of District Disaster Management Authority. The members under this authority are the collector or the district magistrate or the deputy commissioner of the district as the ex officio chairperson of the district authority. The elected representative of the local authority as a co-chair, chief executive officer of district authority, the superintendent of the police, the chief medical officer of the district, not exceeding two other district level officers to be appointed by the state government. So, in case of tribal areas, as referred to the sixth schedule of the Constitution, the co-chairperson is a member of the district council of an autonomous district. Under Section 30 of the Act, the powers and functions of the district authority were laid down. Some of them are preparing a disaster management plan for the district, implementation of plans and policies, identifying the areas vulnerable to the disasters, giving directions to district authorities and laying down the guidelines, assessing the state of capabilities for responding to any disaster and preparedness measures, examining the construction in the districts for the prevention of disaster, identifying buildings or places which can be used as relief centers or camps at the time of the disaster, establishing stockpiles of relief and rescue materials and ensuring preparedness, organizing specialized training programs for officers or voluntary rescue workers, facilitating community training and awareness programs, and many more. So, the advisory committee that comes under the district level comes under Section 28 of the Act. The district authority may constitute one or more advisory committees and other committees for efficient discharge of its function. Coming to the district plan, under Section 31 of the Act, the district plan shall be prepared by the district authority, which will include areas vulnerable to different disasters in the districts to be taken for the prevention and mitigation of disaster, measures for the capacity building and preparedness, response plans and procedures, other matters as required by the state authority. Coming to the penalties and punishment, so under Chapter 10, namely Offence and Penalties of Disaster Management Act, comprising Section 51 to Section 60, the various offences related to disaster management are obstructing under Section 51, obstructing any to comply with the directions. So the punishment or the penalty will be imprisonment, which may extend to 1 year, or fine, or both. If it results in loss of life, then imprisonment may extend up to 2 years. Coming to Section 52, making a false claim for obtaining the benefits. Imprison, which may extend up to 2 years, and a fine. Section 53, misappropriation of money or materials. Imprisonment up to 2 years and a fine. Section 54, false alarm or warning leading to panic. Imprisonment may extend up to 1 year. Section 50, Section 56, failure of an officer